Joining me today is Laura Buchwald, author of The Book of Reservations. In this second installment of the Ghost Table trilogy, protagonist Josie learns that every haunting begins with the need to be heard. She becomes a messenger of long suppressed truths, ones powerful enough to change lives. Laura Buchwald is a freelance writer and editor who lives in Manhattan and considers New Orleans her second home. She's written for Gotham Magazine, LA Confidential, the websites of Penguin Random House and Simon and Schuster, the New York Daily News, and Page Six, where she frequently covered the restaurant world and the antics of celebrity chefs. She's co-host of the podcast People Who Do Things, a series of conversations with writers and creators about the creative process. Welcome to the show, Laura. Nice to have you on.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
All right. Well, this is an interesting book, obviously. This is the second book in the trilogy, and I think you're working on your third, as I
I
understand
am.
it, and a
hmm
screenplay to go along with that. So that's exciting. Um, let's talk about your belief in the afterlife, because I know nothing about that.
Okay.
All right. And I'm assuming that your liaison or whatever it is with New Orleans has something to do with that. So, yeah. So, what
It
about the after?
does.
Yeah.
So I have always believed in something. I was raised without a religion. I don't know if that's related or not, but in some sense, it feels like it is because, I wasn't raised with a set idea of what happens after. My sister and I firmly believe that our childhood home was haunted. We both had some pretty uncanny experiences as kids that we actually didn't share until we were adults. But so I've always,
So, where was that? I mean, where were you,
we're,
and what were the experiences?
the experiences were really just feelings. It was the house I grew up in White Plains. The house is about 100 years old now. It's in a part of town that figured prominently in the American Revolution. So there's a lot of history, a lot of much older homes around, but there was just always a feeling that I would get in two very specific parts of the house, the basement and the attic. And this lasted, we had the house in our family up until I was in college. And this lasted pretty much the entire time. I didn't spend a lot of time in the attic, but the basement, there was a definite presence there, is the best way I can explain it. When we were very little, we both had vivid dreams about figures being in our rooms that, if one, and I say all of this with a grain of salt,
Yeah. Well,
but
but were these friendly or unfriendly or scary, or were you
it,
fearful? Or
I
yeah.
was fearful. They weren't malevolent. I was fearful because it was so unexpected. And, even though I believe in an afterlife, I don't particularly want to see a ghost. So, it was like in the basement, which we pulled into the driveway, and then we would have to walk through the basement to get up to the house. And there was always this need. I always had this need to just get up those stairs as quickly as possible and not look around. So there was fear. I've since learned that the proprietor of the house before my parents passed away about 6 months before we moved in. Um, my cousin, who's really good at these things, did a bunch of research on the house and its former inhabitants. So, it did strangely always feel like a male presence. And I can't recall the specifics, but I know my sister, when she was sick, when she was a kid, one time when she was sick, she had a sense that there was somebody in the room with her, sitting on her bed. And I never had anything quite that close, but there was just always this eerie presence. And friends of mine kind of sensed it as well. So that was my introduction to the idea that there might be something else out there. And then as an adult, I started going to see spiritual mediums and had truly uncanny experiences.
When you say uncanny experiences, what do you mean? Like we're able to predict the future for you, or what was happening in your
No,
life now, or what?
it was people coming through, people I had lost. The first time I went was in 2004, and I had just lost a couple of friends in fairly quick succession. And this was the very early days of, I don't even know if we were calling it social media at that point, but if you Googled me, you wouldn't have found anything on any of these people. So the specificity of the information that came through, including, well, from names, I asked for names to connect them to living people so I could make sure we were talking about the right people. The methods by which they passed away, all of these things came through in shocking detail. I mean, the very first question he asked me was, "Who is Margaret?" And that's my mother, who's very much living, but her mother had recently passed away, and that was the connection. Um, he got my dog's name. He just really specific, and specific information that these spirits conveyed so that I would be able to identify them. Um, so the one who mentioned my dog was somebody who knew my dog, and my dog would, this was a neighbor, my dog would run into his apartment whenever the door was open. So that was, again, if one believes these things, that was his way of letting me know, kind of honing in on who exactly he was. Um, and really, without getting too graphic, a friend had been killed quite recently when I went to see this medium, and he got right into the precise details of how it happened in a way that there was no way you could have connected me to this person. Um,
So
his
when he
story,
did that, and and obviously, what what was your reaction? I mean, is it,
uh,
yeah.
it was a little bit of everything. Bewilderment. I don't know if comfort set in right away. I think I was a little more, I was stunned. This was a recommendation from a friend of mine, this particular medium, who is fabulous. I've seen him in recent years as well. And so I knew to expect the unexpected. I knew he allegedly was very good at what he does. But it was, there was some real comfort in the people who came through. My grandmother, this particular friend, a friend who had died in 9/11, came through. His name and the numbers 911 came through at the same time. Uh, and not that I really needed much confirmation, but when I asked for a connecting name, he mentioned the name of the person who had introduced us many years earlier. Um, yeah.
When you go to the medium and that's the expert, and as you're saying, these are really legit people, legitimate people,
Mm-hmm.
do you have to what's your, I guess I'm going to say, what is your role in it? I mean, let's say people are listening to you thinking, oh my God, I'm going to, I'm going to call up and find out who was that meeting. I want to go there. Or do you have
Sure.
to be a particular kind of person or somebody who is able to be able to engage in this process, I guess? And some people can't. Do
That's
you
an
know what I'm
excellent
saying?
question. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. Because actually, that time I went with a friend who is very close to the idea, and he didn't get any information during his reading. I think one needs to be open minded. I mean, every medium I've sat with has said, I have no control over who's going to come through or what they're going to say. So you need to be open to the possibility. You need to make connections because the medium is getting information. However, every medium works differently. Some of them get visual information, some of them will get, if it's, say, my grandfather comes through, the medium might get an image of his own grandfather. So it's being able to sort of connect the dots and work with the medium. And I've been to some who, I don't want to say they were charlatans, but they were definitely less impactful than
Yeah.
this particular guy, whose name is Philip Quinn, by the way, and I highly recommend him. He's fabulous. Um, so it's really working with the medium, being open minded, being flexible. If you go in with a need, this is why they say to wait at least 6 months after you lose somebody, because if you go in with a real need to hear from a very specific person, you might walk away disappointed. And um,
What's the setting? Are you in a room? I imagine you can't do it on a Zoom call.
you can actually do it
Oh,
on
you
a Zoom
can.
call. You
Okay.
can, yeah, because it's energy, and energy doesn't need to. be in the same room. This is how it's been explained to me. So that very first one, that was in person. I've done a couple in person, mostly certainly in recent years, they've been via Zoom. But that one was in person in a very unassuming office in Connecticut. And he had a big dog who was lying on the floor but kept looking around the room. And, you know, they say that animals and very small children have these abilities that people tend to lose as they develop their rational minds. So this dog, something was keeping this dog's attention, and he was just darting around the room, looking around the room, really intently. He had been just lying on the floor when I walked in. And I remember Philip Quinn said, wow, this room is really filling up quickly. Um, I've also been told, and I do believe that I have some untapped mediumistic abilities. I've had some experiences where I've walked into rooms and felt that somebody had passed away recently and then learned that that was the case. This happened a couple of times in the early 2000s, right around the time I started spending a lot of time in New Orleans, which, you know, to get back to your original thought there, you know, New Orleans has a very strong and unique bond with the afterlife. They
Yeah, I
really
want to talk about
celebrate.
that. And but
Mm-hmm.
I want to just respond to something you said. I mean, like are if you have that ability, as you say, like a medium, um, do you, if you're getting messages maybe that are unpleasant, or
Mm-hmm.
things that you wouldn't necessarily want to share with somebody, what do you do, or what's your response? Do you feel like you have a responsibility to tell them, or how does, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I don't get specific messages. I haven't really worked to develop my mediumistic abilities, but I have asked mediums about that. And, you know, they're very tactful. And apparently, it's very rare for a spirit to give an ominous message. Um, you know, I don't know how psychics work if they were to see something off putting, what their responsibility would be. I guess if it were a really clear cut message,
Life
and I,
threatening.
yeah, exactly, then I would certainly hope at least
Yeah.
that they would share it. Um, I, you know, I know people in that world. I know psychics and readers, all sorts of, you know, energy readers, and I've heard of cases where there have been warnings that have panned out. There was one, I'm trying to remember the details, quite recently, where a woman I know who does do psychic readings told somebody she was reading to check their electricity, and indeed there was some faulty wiring in one part of their house that you know, she got information that they should be looking into that, and so a crisis was potentially averted there. But the messages that I tend to get from mediums are more just validation of the presence of my departed loved ones.
Okay, so that's very different than, let's say, oh, I'm thinking this is horrific, but this I don't know if he's a serial killer, or killings are connected, but what's been happening just in our political system of
Mm-hmm.
the two people being killed at Brown and the MIT professor being killed. Can you bring in a medium or a psychic, a legitimate one, to help the law enforcement perhaps figure out who's
Yeah,
doing it? Yeah.
there are definitely psychics and mediums who do work with law enforcement. Um, uh, some years ago, a friend of a friend went missing, and I asked somebody I knew if they were getting any information, and they did get information that was not good. And it turned out that this missing person had passed away. That person, that was a one off for me. I just happened to be in contact with somebody, but there are definitely mediums and psychics who work with law enforcement and help to solve cold cases.
Hmm. All right, let's get to New Orleans. Okay, so
Yes.
how does that fit into the picture? Yeah.
So, New Orleans, I first went to back in 2000, and I've been probably about 15 or 16 times since. I just love the city. The first book, the predecessor to the Book of Reservations, is set in part in New Orleans. So I went down there quite a bit on just by myself on these writing retreats. Um, I love so much about New Orleans culture, just the feel of the city. It's unlike anywhere else I've ever been. There's, you know, magic and music and amazing food, and people who live in New Orleans love to live in New Orleans and talk about it. And there's a lot of pride, and of course it has such interesting history, and it's such a cultural blend of so many different places that have impacted it over the years. And I just find it really magical. And when I started going down on my own, I made a bunch of friends there. I already had a small handful of people I knew there, but I got to know more people. And, you know, almost every person one encounters there has the afterlife is, or a belief in the afterlife is rarely in question. It just is. And, you know, I've met so many people down there who just, it's a given. They'll say, yeah, of course, we have ghosts here. Um, you know, it also has obviously a lot of very dark history to it. So there are, there's no shortage of, you know, ghost tours and historical tours and voodoo tours that talk about all of the many haunted places. The French Quarter has a large concentration of allegedly haunted places.
All right, give
Um,
me three suggestions. I'm going to be in New Orleans for about four
you
days.
are
Yeah, 4 days from now.
okay.
Yeah, okay. So as I'm listening to you, okay. So,
I
and
can,
yeah.
yeah. Well, if you're interested in the ghost side of things, there's a restaurant called Muriel's in Jackson Square that is allegedly haunted. It was a private home that was reconstructed after the Good Friday fire of, I'm going to botch the year if I try to name
Yeah.
it, but of many years ago. Um, the proprietor of the house bet it in a poker game and lost it. And right before he was to move out, he allegedly went upstairs and took his own life. And they have a seance room that people can rent out for private parties, or you can just, you know, get a drink downstairs and go up and sit in it. And anybody who works there can tell you the story of their spirit. They said, so that's what inspired the ghost table part of the Ghost Table trilogy. They set a table every night for their resident ghost and a friend. And it's really neat. You can see it right there, you know, right in the staircase. There's a table set with place settings and glasses of wine and water. And I just thought that was really cool and a really kind of lovely way to pay tribute to their resident ghost. So
All
that's
right. So that
one.
should be number one on the list.
That's a good one. The restaurant Antoine's, also in the French Quarter, which is the oldest continually run family owned restaurant in the country, also has a ghost and has amazing, you know, old school New Orleans food and just a lovely atmosphere. So those two I would recommend. And then I would also recommend, I mean, their cemeteries are really interesting to tour. They're these, you know, above
They're above
ground.
ground, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like cities honoring their dead. They're really interesting, and um, I think it's St. Louis Cemetery number one, I believe, is where Marie Laveau is buried. She was the voodoo queen who allegedly put a spell on the drinking water in New Orleans so that once you sample it, you can't help but come back. And that was certainly the case for me. I couldn't help but come back. I'm planning a trip for the new year as well. Um, yeah,
And
it's
I'm
just
bringing kids with me too. So that's,
okay.
yeah.
Well, maybe a ghost tour would be fun. There's also a fabulous bookstore, the Faulkner House bookstore in Pirates Alley in New Orleans. It was William Faulkner's home. It was his private home, and it's a tiny little beautifully curated bookstore. I also have to give a shout out to the Garden District bookshop in the Garden District, which is a beautiful part of town. I had a reading there, a reading of my book there last year, and I'm hopefully going to do another one in the new year. So yeah, bookstores and ghosts and fabulous food, and you almost don't need to go out to hear live music in order to hear live music.
Music.
It's everywhere. Um, Yeah, it's a fabulous special
Yeah,
city.
I'm looking obviously looking forward to it. I also okay, that's New Orleans, and now I sort of I do now have a picture of how that inspired you for the trilogy, the books. But you also talk about New York, getting back to New York
Hmm.
City, the restaurant culture here, as I understand it, also has inspired you or has inspired this trilogy.
Absolutely. It was originally inspired by a restaurant in Greenwich Village that I used to spend a lot of time. Uh, First, it was that I got to know the staff and got to know the way, this is a theme in my books. They really developed into a found family, where, everybody had each other's backs. Even if you didn't particularly like a person, you were part of this dysfunctional family together. Um, and it was really interesting to watch them operate. And then one day I got that same creepy feeling that I would get in my childhood basement. And I jokingly asked the bartender if the ladies' room, which was upstairs on a separate floor, if the ladies' room was haunted. And he said, yeah, a lot of people say that it is. So that was the original impetus for the first book and for the series. I've been back. It's changed hands several times since then. I've been back in recent months and asked the wait staff if they ever felt any paranormal energy in the building. And each person that I asked said yes. One person said, I do not like closing here by myself. Um, so it that's the specifics of what inspired. But I'm also just I love restaurants. I live in New York City, which has some of the best restaurants in the world. I'm not a particularly good cook, so I've spent a lot of time in restaurants over the years. And all the myriad reasons people go out to eat, to celebrate, um, you know, to celebrate any one of life's milestones. People go out to get engaged and to break up. And, there's just a whole host of human emotion in a restaurant on any given night. Um, they say that spirits are attracted to human emotion and emotional energy, which is why restaurants and hotels and theaters, places that have a lot of people coming through their doors on any given night, and certainly over time, why they're allegedly hotbeds of spiritual activity.
So, in
Uh,
other words, there are groups of people you're saying. I didn't,
mm-hmm.
yeah, I didn't. So, if you're sitting at home alone in your living room, you might not have the opportunity to engage with spirits, right? Because,
I
you
mean,
know,
I don't, but certainly if one is a medium, I mean, one has to turn it off so that they're not inundated 24/7 with messages from the spirit world or with spirits wanting their attention. But yeah, it's and again, all of this I say with a grain of salt because I find it fascinating, but I understand that it's not for everybody and not everyone is going to be a believer. But yeah, they say that places that have a lot of people, a lot of energy, like theaters, hotels, and restaurants, um, draw more energy, draw more spiritual energy.
well, if you're not a believer, then reading your books, the trilogy, the table trilogy, introduces you or introduces one to all of that, right?
Yeah, and I do so. My books aren't scary, and the spirits aren't menacing. Um, they're not even really. I wouldn't call them ghost stories. They're stories that have ghosts in them. My main characters are very much alive, and my main protagonist, Josie Gray, in the Book of Reservations, is learning how to navigate her spiritual gifts. She has the ability to communicate, and how to navigate it in a world that doesn't always believe her and doesn't always believe in these things. And it's just has become a persistent part of her life. And she has a very pragmatic partner who doesn't believe. So there is the question of the belief system certainly exists in these books.
Well, we're going to look, well, beside, we're also looking forward to the third book, as I said, I think in the beginning, in the intro. We only have a
Mm-hmm.
couple of minutes left, but can you kind of tell us how that fits in with a screenplay?
Oh, well, so my screenplay is not related to my books. I'm working on a romantic comedy with no ghosts in it with a collaborator, a friend of mine in Los Angeles. I do have an agent who's representing these books for film and television rights, and a lot of people have said, they're very visual. I think they would make for great, either a limited series or something of that nature. They're fun. They have a big cast of characters. They're fairly dialogue heavy. I do like dialogue. Um, so I have thought about writing, just attempting to write a screenplay based upon these books. I haven't done anything about it yet, but
Okay.
I would love it if somebody else wanted to write them.
Well, all right. Well, then we're going to wait, I guess, right? We'll wait for
Yes,
we'll have to wait for the screenplay. But okay, so now tell us platforms, websites we can go to
sure.
for more information about what we've been talking about and also about the books.
Absolutely. So my website is laurabuchwald.com. It's LauraBuchwald.com. I also have a Facebook author page, and I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, but I'm really not on TikTok. I don't quite understand TikTok,
Maybe
but I
you
know
are and maybe you're not. Okay.
I'm supposed to be on it, so I'm on it. And I will do more with it. And then, as you mentioned, my podcast, People Who Do Things, is available wherever one listens to podcasts. And we have a lot of fun with that. We talk a bit about our own projects, but we also really love speaking with other writers and creators about all things creative process, everything from writer's block to great success in writing and, everything in between.
That's great. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Lots
Thank
of
you,
good,
Kathryn.
but new information for me. I'll say that. Yeah, Laura Buchwald, The Book of Reservations is her new book. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy New
Yep,
Orleans.
I will. Joining me today is Donnie Yance, author of The Medicine on Your Plate: Eating for Health and Longevity. In an age dominated by quick fixes, viral wellness trends, and one size fits all solutions, a quieter truth is reclaiming its place. Food remains one of our most powerful forms of medicine. There is a growing return to what ancient healing traditions have always understood, that nourishment is not just fuel, but a force capable of restoring balance, vitality, and even hope. Internationally recognized certified nutritionist Donnie Yance has long explored this connection. His work reveals how nourishing foods can activate protective genes, while poor dietary choices may switch on those linked to disease, shaping health outcomes over time. Central to his philosophy is the belief that a healthy relationship with food fosters a healthy relationship with ourselves. He's widely respected for his pioneering contributions to botanical and nutritional medicine, particularly in integrative cancer care. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you on, Donnie.
Hi, Kathryn. Thank you for having me. My
Okay.
pleasure.
All right. So, where do we start? Food is medicine. Shall we don't always look at, I don't think necessarily, that food is medicine and that it's important that we eat the right foods, because it seems to me that most of us, many Americans are not eating the right foods. We are obese, we are overweight, we have all kinds of health issues related to not eating the right foods. Or the food.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things you opened up with for sure is my opening message is that food is a relationship. And just like any other relationship, you want to have a good relationship. You want it to be intimate. You want it to be healthy. And you want to see that relationship through a lot of different lenses. You want to embrace the intellectual aspects of what it means to be healthy and eat healthy. You want to embrace the potentially emotional or cultural aspects of what you're attracted to, what your ancestors ate, and what you love to eat, and what flavors you like. And then you also have to understand food goes quite a bit deeper than that. You know, when we ingest food, I often say that food can have a very positive effect on promoting health and optimizing health, and even being an integral part of healing from various conditions and diseases. Food can be neutral, not doing much good for us and not necessarily hurting us. And food can be very harmful. And when food is harmful to us, it's a double negative, because you're ingesting calories that are doing harm to your body, while at the same time not getting healthy calories that could be very health promoting. And so it's actually a double negative to
So,
eat
I'm going
poorly.
to stop you there. So, why do we choose foods that are not healthy for us? Why do we continue to do that?
Well, I'll go back to what I first started with, a poor relationship, because you're not thinking deeply. You know, when you look outside to nature and you see how bounty and how beautiful nature is, and go out around food that is growing out in nature, whether you're walking in a garden or walking in a trail in the woods, and you come across some wild berries, some huckleberries, and all of a sudden, you know, your relationship goes to a deeper level with food. You know, you say, "Wow, this is food that is actually coming from Mother Earth. You know, it's coming from our Creator, and this is the food I want the relationship with." And so you know, a lot of people today don't even get out in nature, and they never had a garden before. They didn't grow up with that type of understanding about food. They don't even know where tomato comes from.
Yeah.
You know, it's
The
like,
grocery
you know,
store.
yeah, so like one of my visions was always that every school, like as kids grow up, every school should have a course in what it means to be healthy, and part of that would be that every school should have a garden, and kids should go out in the garden and learn how to grow food and learn how to prepare food, and it would make life so much easier, because then that relationship would start in a very profound and beautiful way, and we wouldn't be so attracted to things, you know, fast food and convenience food and all the things that we're really not intended to be ingesting and aren't healthy for us on any level, because then we're eating quickly And the other aspects about what it means to be healthy and eat healthy isn't just about what you eat, it's about when you eat, how you
How you
eat,
eat. Yeah. I want to
and
get back to the
who
thing
you
about
eat.
being attracted to food in its environment, like in the garden or and outside or an apple on a tree.
Mhm.
But what we are programmed to be attracted to is the packaging in the food, going to the grocery store and depending on how attractive the package is and how what the colors are that lure us in to buy certain kinds of food that perhaps maybe most of the time aren't good for us.
I don't know about that. I
You
think
know?
that if you got people out in
Uh-huh.
nature, they'd be attracted to food in a much more beautiful way. Just the smell of some food when it's fresh and you're pulling it, fresh out of the garden. I mean, just to smell like basil, that you're growing. Anyone can grow basil. I mean, I grew up, with my mother who's born in Italy, and her grandma, my grandmother came here with three kids, and her husband died as soon as they got here. So this was during the Depression. They had no money, and my grandmother didn't speak a word of English, and she didn't drive a car, and it was a very difficult upbringing my mother had. And still, she remembers the little porch that they lived on. This apartment they lived in. They grew as much food as possible on this porch. Everything you can imagine they grew on this porch. And so I think that everyone can take time, no matter where they live, to start growing fresh herbs, for example. They smell beautiful and they lift our mood, just to smell them. Smelling basil makes me feel good. It's
So
like,
you have
so
to expose your kids, is what you're saying. Like whether, yeah, you
absolutely.
can
You
be in
have
your
to,
apartment building and be growing herbs and spices and things that you can smell and touch and feel, and that makes it.
yeah. I
But it
mean, my
has to be
sec
done early. I mean, like as you're talking about your grandmother, your mother, you have to really introduce kid. I think in the very big when they first start eating.
Yeah, my daughter Stella, my second daughter, just got back a couple of days ago from Italy. She was in Florence, and she's going to culinary school, and she's also really into understanding the relationship of food from a healing perspective. And so she wants to that to be her life. I said, well, there's nothing more beautiful one can do than prepare healing food for people. I mean, what a beautiful service and moving forward. So, and the way that I work too. So I work with six toolboxes basically, and food as medicine is one of them. And next year I'll have a book out all about food. Although my book on adaptogens has chapters on food, my book on cancer does. I'm writing a book called The Healing Pharmacy, and pharmacy is spelled with an F, not a PH. And so it's kind of my whole understanding about how to eat and all the different ways that we can unpack what it means to be healthy and from having that relationship with food. But food as medicine is one area that I focus on. Herbal medicine, botanical medicine, nutritional supplemental medicine, modern medicine, like how it implements and interacts with all of these other natural means of healing, lifestyle as medicine, and then spiritual care as medicine. So those are the six toolboxes I work with, and they're all weaved together. And the beauty is that when you start to changing your diet alone when you're working like I do with advanced disease is not necessarily going to create in and of itself a perfect outcome. So a lot
Can
of
we
people,
relate that? Because I think that was the last sentence in the intro. You're working with people, cancer and food, because so many people are
Mhm.
being diagnosed with cancer. And unfortunately, younger people in their 30s and 40s now, have a much higher rate of cancer than, say, 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Colon cancer is epidemic for that age group, and nobody can quite understand why. I did a whole blog on the increase in colon cancer in young people, but other cancers as well.
Well, let's talk
Um,
about colon cancer, because,
mhm.
yeah.
So probably colon cancer is one of those cancers that is more tied into the diet than maybe other cancers. Not to diminish the impact that diet has on any and all disease, but the colon is this barrier that we ingest things and we take things in, and it has this own environment in it. They call it the enteric brain or the microbiome, and I know gut health and all of that is popular. So when we start eating poorly, we create an environment in our gut that's very, very unhealthy. Then we add a lot of various pharmaceuticals. Growing up, with the what I would say the misuse of antibiotics wreaks havoc in our gut because it destroys all of our flora, and then we have to figure out how to get that back. And we're not eating the foods which would be, say, probiotic foods, prebiotic foods, and then what's called the short chain fatty acids, the fibrous foods that those probiotics eat to develop this beautiful, diverse environment in our colon. Then you take the importance of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the key, the gateway into the parasympathetic nervous system, and you know that that vagus nerve is called rest and digest. And so we're now a culture. The modern lifestyle is a very fast lifestyle. Everything's stimulation, and we're not relaxed the way we should be in order to eat and assimilate, and what I mean by assimilate, not just absorb, but assimilate all of the healthy nutrients we need to be taking in. And those nutrients, when people think of diet, they usually think of macro, maybe micro, but they don't think of nano nutrition. So nutrition, macro is like, oh, how much protein is in this food? How many carbohydrates? That's insignificant. Those are things that's not a good understanding of food. Micronutrition is the vitamins and minerals in the food, but nanonutrition is where we really is important, and that's these intrinsic small molecules, metabolites in food. And by the way, wild food produces way more of those constituents, those secondary metabolites. So I always tell people, my mother grew up eating dandelion greens because they couldn't afford to grow anything else. And so dandelion is so nutritious. Nettle greens are so nutritious. So
I used to eat those when I was a kid, when I was out playing.
Oh,
Interesting you should
nettles?
say. No, dandelions.
Well, dandelion and nettles, you can't get two healthier foods to eat than that.
I
You
mean,
talk about, and
they were
those are
just
weeds.
and they were attractive, and so we used to eat. That's funny that you should mention that.
And I have a mug, Catherine. I have a mug that says "Celebrate dandelions. If you can't beat them, eat them."
Eat them.
Because there's millions, billions of dollars spent every year on trying to get rid of dandelions in people's lawns, and guess what? They keep coming back.
Yeah, I actually, that's what I told my kids. That's funny. I've never heard this before, actually. So doing the right thing, right? But people. One of the things all of what you're talking about, healthy eating. Why do many people don't start eating that way, or don't start becoming knowledgeable of what they should be eating until they are diagnosed with cancer, and then all of a sudden they're looking at their diets and what they should eat and how it's going to cure them, or but they don't do it beforehand.
It's a great point, and I think that's true of other things too. I mean, I have people that come, say, with early prostate cancer, and they're on 7 or 8 medications. They're walking time bombs for heart disease, and they may have gout, and they have a whole bunch of other high risk conditions that make them, for sure, they're going to die of heart disease. But the word cancer spoofs them, and then all of a sudden they want to think about getting healthy. So a healthy diet isn't necessarily about how you treat a disease, although there can be specific components based on the type of cancer that you have, that you might eat certain foods, say for HER2 cancer, like olives. But olives have all kinds of other health benefits outside of that. So typically eating well is going to not just be based on the condition, but based on how to optimize health, what really is relative to how we can live better, healthier, and how we can live longer. So a lot of people go for these fad diets, whether it be, any kind of diet that's a fad diet. They get diagnosed with cancer. They get very, very serious. They go on radical types of diets because they heard about them from somebody on the internet without a lot of validation, and looking through those two lenses. Then after a year or two, they don't, they kind of fade, and they go back to eating the way they were. Where I try to gradually get people healthier and healthier. I said, this is a lifestyle you want to embrace for the rest of your life. So again, it has to be workable, for you and your family. And
when you say workable for you and your family, because this fits into my next question that I really do want to ask you about. As people age, different stages of their lives, they may eat differently for different reasons. Aging, for instance, people who are aging, baby boomers, you can start with each one of the generations, I guess. Do they or should they be more aware of perhaps their eating habits do change, will change, as opposed to, Gen X, the millennials, Gen Z?
I think everyone should start right where they're at and start thinking about this and again in a way that isn't like acutely thinking. Like this isn't like an ambulance thing. This is like I want to start and figure out how I can little by little get my diet healthier and healthier in a reasonable way with the rest of my lifestyle. And again, it starts by understanding the relationship. What is my deep intimate relationship? Like anything else, we want to improve our relationships. We want to make them as healthy as possible, and that includes food. And then I always tell people, strive to be 90% perfect. Don't try to be 100% perfect. So everyone should have a tiny bit of a wiggle worm, but even within that 10%, I'm not saying to eat, garbage food, but things like you can eat some things that might not be perfect for your health in that. Like, again, I'm primarily Italian, so I like Mediterranean food. My favorite food in the whole world is bread. So I mostly eat very, very healthy multi-grain bread. I make my own pizza crust, grind my own flour. I do a lot at home. But if I'm eating out at a really good restaurant and they have a really great ciabatta bread, I'll eat it. I love it. But everything else is perfect. And then I say, you can change the way you eat. You go out to a restaurant, have a big salad. Make sure the salad dressing is just olive oil based and vinegar or lemon juice. Don't use any commercial salad dressings. That's start right off the bat. Don't even buy salad dressings in the grocery store. Forget it. There's nothing good there. Anyone can just pour olive oil and vinegar on their salad or make a quick dressing. It's the easiest thing in the world. Put 5 to 7 different things in your salad. Have a big salad. You want to lose weight? Start with a big salad. Cut your plate into 4 pieces. Half your plate should be vegetables. A quarter should be your healthy starch, whether it be potatoes, whatever you want, brown rice, whatever you want to eat, pasta, whatever you want. A quarter piece should be your protein. Very, very easy starting point to do that. You don't have to.
I find when you go to restaurants, many restaurants try to impose exactly the opposite of what you're saying, which always bothers me. The portions are too big. I've gotten into now with my partner, he and I, we share a portion. You get these portions that are for 4 people instead of 2, and I'm a good eater. That's one thing. And they try to race you through dinner. And even some restaurants now say, well, you have an hour and a half and you have to get out of here, even if it's a good restaurant. So it's like, could we eat? I mean, I actually have to tell the waiter, could we slow down? I barely sit down and they want to take your order.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah, they wanna spin
get
the
it.
table if they can, but
That's
I
right.
always say like also they don't tend to give enough vegetables. So if they don't have on the menu, I tell my patients like they don't have vegetables like side vegetables on the menu. Almost every restaurant you can ask, do you have any vegetables you can saute or steam and bring out with the dinner? So then all of a sudden you're changing the portions of what you're eating. You're getting more vegetables, but you're still getting some of everything else that you want to eat. So you don't have to like stop eating that because again, this concept of, oh, I'm going to go fat free, which, I wrote my first book in 98 called Herbal Medicine, Healing and Cancer. And in that book, I said, don't eat anything non-fat, like no non-fat dairy, eat a whole-based, plant-based diet, Mediterranean diet. But don't eat anything refined, and that includes refining the food from making cheese that's non-fat or whatever. And back then in the 90s, everything the fat-free craze was all over the place. So I got so much flack for that. And then it flipped completely opposite. Don't eat carbohydrates and eat as much fat as you want. It's like, and now it's high protein, and none of those are correct. I say go to cultures that have health and have lived a long time. You can look at blue zones, you can, and a lot of the things that people perceive to be unhealthy are like the healthiest things you can eat. A regular potato is one of the healthiest foods on the face of the planet is the humble potato. There's only one food that can sustain human life as a single food, and that's a potato.
And I
You
have a
can live
potato
on
at
a
least
potato.
5 days a week, I want you to know. And
Oh, well, there you
yes,
go,
yeah,
Catherine. Well, you
I'm
can, they're
following your
loaded
advice.
with
Yeah,
nutrition and
yep,
you can lose weight on them because they're low in calories
yeah.
and they fill you up, they satisfy you, and they're extremely healthy, but they're very humble. You know what I mean by
Yeah.
humble is they're easy to, I tell people there wouldn't be any Irish people if it wasn't for potatoes.
You don't have to be a gourmet cook to eat a potato, right?
No, no, and it could be a sweet potato, it could be a red potato, it could be a Yukon Gold potato. Just I love the purple potatoes, and they have more anthocyanins than any super berry. People are going out. I got to eat my blueberries. I said, no, no, no. The purple potato has higher amounts of anthocyanins than blueberries have. And so they're incredibly healthy. And
And you
I eat.
can buy
I
them in
love.
the grocery store now, a combo. Now they have,
Oh yeah, I love
yeah,
the little combos, the
yeah.
heirloom combos. They're great, and you can also, I think that people think in terms of like I think bread is one. If you can make bread with whole grains with a sourdough, it's also one of the healthiest foods. When you go around the world, the most every culture has embraced making bread. The yeast makes it a living food. Bread is a fermented food. The particle size when you grind the grains fresh heirloom grains, you're bringing the particle size way down. You're kneading it. There's a whole thing about the importance of making bread and then breaking bread at the table. And so that's another misnomer that people have. And
Don't you have to
and
be careful though when you go to the grocery store? I'm one of those people who reads the labels. Some of these breads are filled with all kinds of stuff and sugar and salt and things I can't pronounce. So you really don't you have to really,
with
yeah,
anything,
yeah,
with everything, the less refined things, there's usually like bakers that are now starting to bake with sourdough, use whole grains, make these really amazing breads, hard crusty breads, and I think that you just have to look a little harder. I know I live in Ashland, Oregon, so I don't live in a city with a bunch of chains and only Whole Foods. We have a lot of little small co-ops and things like that, and bakeries, really unbelievably healthy bread makers around the valley, which is an art form. To make bread correctly is an art form, and so yeah, but that's to me that's with anything and everything. You've got to find the healthiest version of any food. Any food can be made to be healthy. I can make anything healthy. You tell me, what you like to eat. I'll figure out how to make it in a healthy way that you'll like it even more. I made for Thanksgiving. I made an oat flour apple cake. I ground all my oat flour myself. You grate like 3 apples. I use 5 spices: cinnamon, cardamom, nutmeg, ginger, and cloves, and came out. And I only sweetened it with maple syrup, and so coconut oil, a little bit of coconut oil in it. So as healthy as a dessert can make, I made it. Oats are amazing for you. Oat flours are, going back to the colon, one of the best foods for providing those short chain fatty acids. They're rich in beta glucans, great for your immune system, really resistive, because we need to have, not necessarily take fiber supplements, but we want to make sure we're having whole grains and having a diversity of whole foods that provide that fiber for the probiotics to live on. So then when you eat things like sauerkraut and fermented dairies, like one of the best foods for your colon and prevent cancer is Reggiano Parmesan cheese. Not the cheap stuff you go into the store that's a
yeah.
replacement for that, but the
The
real
real deal, the real,
Italian
yeah.
Reggiano cheese has been shown to build the healthy organisms gut in the gut better than any other food that
So
you can
you
ever
buy
think
that
of.
cheese at the cheese counter or where the real cheese
Yeah,
is,
yeah, it
right?
has to
Yeah.
say like 18-month fermented, true Parmesan Reggiano. It has to say that on it. And that is a wonderful, healthy food for your gut. So when you take your Reggiano Parmesan cheese, your vinegars fermented, your sourdough bread, your kefir. I make a smoothie every morning with either sheep, goat, cow, or coconut yogurt or kefir in it. So you have to start thinking like, where's my fermented food? The prebiotic foods are barley and oats and onions and leeks and jicama. Those are all really good for helping the gut. Inulin-rich foods like
I have one
even
more question
coffee.
because we only have a couple minutes left. I don't mean to
Okay.
interrupt, but I do. You mentioned smoothie. Are
Yeah.
smoothies? Oh, I mean, I always feel like I want something to eat to sink my teeth into, so I don't eat or drink smoothies. So is that good
Yeah, I
or
mean,
bad? Yeah.
it's not either one. I mean, you have to do what works for you. I love starting my day off with what I call a medicinal smoothie because it's a way to get like the most densely packed amount of nutrition. So I put scoop of one of my own formulas called Enliven that gives me a diversity of plant foods, vegetables, superfoods, super fruits. And then I add a scoop of our Amino Whey Pro, which gives me the highest quality whey protein with some other peptide amino acids in it. I put that yogurt in, some coconut water in, some different frozen fruits and berries, and I just blend that up and make a smoothie with it. And there's no way I could ever eat the amount of nutrition I give my body. So even if I'm going to eat something, for me, I like to have that smoothie because I
That you
start
get
my day
yeah.
off with a massive amount of nutrition on all those levels, those macro, micro, and nano levels. I've
Okay, we're going
bathed
to
my
end on
body.
that one because that's good advice, and maybe I'll try it after listening to you because I didn't, I guess, realize how much good stuff I could pack into the smoothie, more than just eating food, right? Donnie Yance, that's who we've been talking to, nutritionist. We've been the medicine on your plate, eating for health and longevity. But there's so much more to talk about, and you mentioned a blog, so give us some other platforms to
Yeah,
go
so my
to. Yeah.
my my blog is my outreach, so people can get a lot of recipes, learn about food. I did a blog recently on food for the brain, food for prostate cancer, a blog on eggplant, a blog on Parmesan cheese. So all of that stuff, and I'm an incredible researcher. So my new book coming out is going to have 1,600 citations in it. So that is my name, DonnieYance, DonnieYance.com. And then my foundation and my clinic and my school that I've built is the Mederi Center, MEDERI Center.org. And then my product line is called Natura, Natura, Health Products, and that's naturahealthproducts.com. And then lastly, I'm also a musician, a jazz musician. So if anyone loves music, they can go onto Spotify and just put my name in and listen. I'm a bass player, so it's very bass centric, and that is Heaven Awaits is my first album, and then Cosmic Force is my second album, and that's
Fantastic.
it.
Good food and good music. I love it. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
You're so welcome,
Yeah,
Catherine.
great to have you.